Have you ever stopped and thought about how much information is presented to you in a given day? Or even how much information is at your access each day? It's almost too much to fathom. You might even say it's overwhelming to think about. Well, information is overwhelming in itself. And this sort of chaos as a result of information is nothing new. According to James Gleick, people have been discussing the concept of experiencing new news every day since as early as the 1600s. He coins the phrase information overload, a term he defines as an apathy, indifference, or mental exhaustion arising from exposure to too much information. Information overload is overwhelming and problematic for various reasons. First and foremost, more information does not always mean better information. With the rise of the internet, the information presented to us is not always provided by experts, but mere individuals within our social networks. It also becomes impossible to absorb all of this information, so many important things get lost in what feels like a flood. It can also be said that the value of individual lives become cheapened, as people have the ability to easily brush past important accomplishment or news of others. All of these are reasons that information can become frustrating to try and sort through. Thus, Weinberger and others pose the important question: how can we manage this information overload? According to Clay Shirky, it's not information overload, it's filter failure. In other words, there's various filters that exist, alongside information technology and systems, that aim to consolidate or categorize the information we are exposed to. This claim by Shirky is the most logical approach to this information phenomenon. The failure of filters is indeed what leads to people experiencing information overload. To specify, Weinberger defines this attempt to filter information as an effort to filter, winnow, and otherwise reduce it to something more manageable. And just as information overload has existed long in history, forms of traditional filters have long existed as well. As Rhodri Mardson writes, there have always been people and organizations filtering on our behalf. For example, places like libraries act as filters, because librarians have the ability to choose what books are placed on the shelves. These selected books become the information available to the public. Other old filters include things like textbooks and newspapers, which filter history or news for us. Or even in a more general sense, social interaction has served as a traditional filter, as people share their available knowledge with others. On the other hand, new filters are things such as search engines, social media feeds, and algorithms for operations like Netflix and Amazon, which create recommendations. All of these sort of technology-designed filters supposedly select information that tailors to our interests. For example, Google has an algorithm that shapes search results in different ways for each individual user, tailoring them to stop us from getting annoyed at irrelevant stuff. According to Weinberger, the major difference between these filters and traditional filters is that they don't remove content, but instead filter forward. Yet, people can also choose to cope with information overload by constructing their own filters, such as only watching certain TV channels. Let's take a look at the filter choices of others.
So for me, one way I filter is I use Do Not Disturb on the iPhone, and that sort of helps me manage and navigate all the different notifications and sounds that are coming up on my phone when I need to study, so I can sort of be able to step away from the phone and get to work when I need to.
On Instagram, I follow hashtags of things that I like, whether it's like dogs or fashion or food, instead of following a ton of different accounts. In that way, I don't have to see every post, because a lot of those accounts will post like 3 times a day, whereas by following the hashtag, it just gives me maximum like 20 per day in my feed. In that way, I still get a little bit of feel for what I want, but I don't need to see way too many, and I get buried, all my friends' photos get buried in that instead.
So the way I choose to filter my information, specifically through my phone and the notifications I get from my phone, are I set up different times throughout the day where I choose to look at different notifications. So if it's text, maybe I set up several different times at lunch and dinner and in the evenings, to where if there's something important with someone, I'm going to text them during those times if it's going to be a longer drawn out conversation. And emails, I do the same, setting up times in the evening especially when I have to think a little more about what I'm going to say to those people. I really need to block off times for what I'm going to say. And that's just one of the ways I set apart my time with my phone and my information on there.
As you can see, filters are as abundant and unique as information itself. And in reality, information overload only exists because of the failures of filters. As noted by the Interaction Design Foundation, it's important for us as individuals to make attempts to avoid information overload because of these filter failures, whether that's by freely ignoring information or learning to skim. With the empowerment of filtering, we can begin tackling the phenomenon of information overload by uncovering what information is of real relevance to our lives.